So next one on stage is gonna be Maria. Maria, you can come up, yeah, and wave from here.
Thank you.
They can see you better. Oh, I'm almost fell off. Yeah, that's the end of the stage there. So Maria is, she's been with us last year, the pandemic version of the conference. And this year we decided to invite her too. Maria is not only yes, this is the correct slide. Maria is not only very smart, she can also draw. And she has a background in linguistics, and she speaks perfect German. So you can test her if you know some German. Yes, talk to her.
Hello.
Yeah, and enjoy the talk Maria has prepared for you.
Okay. Well, anyway, the topic of my presentation today is when does Angular execute your code? So we're going to start in the present and go on a time adventure. We're going to make some steps into the past and have a look. Well, actually, I plan to go that way, but I don't want to repeat your mistakes. Well, anyway, so we're going to make some steps into the past and look at the options, hooks, and mechanics that Angular offers us so that we can hook in and run our code earlier and earlier and earlier in the process of in the application process. On the other hand, we will also look into the future and have a look what are the options that we can run the code after the user clicked and interacted with our website. And I see my slides in here, and I see them there. Perfect. So this is the agenda of the talk. And before we dig deeper into the code, I'd like to briefly introduce myself. My name is Maria Korneeva. I am a human being. I have a PhD in informatics. I am a Google developer expert in Angular. I conduct some workshops for Workshops.de, and I quit my job last Wednesday, and I would like to become a freelancer by April. Wish me luck. By the way, one of this is not true. So if you have any questions regarding my talk or whatsoever, you might use this as an icebreaker if you would like to approach me. I really want to know what you think, which is not true of that. So it's code o'clock. Let's have a look at our options. I've prepared a real-world use case application. It has some components. It has some standalone components. It has some lazy-loaded modules. It has some lazy-loaded components. It has some services, so it has a bit of everything. So you might recognize some enterprise-style applications here. And I also prepared a logger, which is a fancy version of console log with some color and the option to turn off some logging for some topics. Give me a sign if you can see it as OK, or should make it a bit bigger. OK? Yeah? Good. Perfect. So then, let's start with the presence. The user clicks on the button, and our code runs. But what if we would like to run our code just before, like, for example, when the component instantiates or being initialized? What would be the option? I know that the first rows know the answer. Something with hooks? Lifecycle hooks? No? I hope you're going to answer this. So let's have a look what my logger, fancy logger can do. I activate it, and we have a look here. We go to the lazy loaded module. In here, we have a parent component with a button which increases the counter. And in the child component, we have the counter which gets in via the input. So if you can, as you can see, or maybe not, I just reloaded. Here we start with the ng onInit as we expected. We have do check after content init, after content checked, and then we switch to the child. And here the first hook, which is being called, is not onInit, it's onChanges. Well, it's forgotten quite often that once you have inputs in your components, the first hook, which is being called, is not onInit but onChanges. However, onInit is still the best lifecycle hook to initialize something. So in here, it goes as expected. Then we have the viewInit, viewChecked, etc. Another example that I'd like to show you is in here. Again, we have a content component, and we have some child components. Those are routing components, meaning that we have some routing parameters in the URL, and it's 1, 2, and 3 for the components. And the thing is, I click on those, and nothing changes. However, if I reload the application again and again and again, you might notice that I just randomly produce the state. It doesn't change if I navigate within the application. And this is due to the caching of routing components, which is the default strategy by Angular. So if you would like your components not to be cached, you might implement a different strategy. I have some notes in here, so that here, route reuse strategy. So you can extend it, implement your own logic, so that this is no longer cached. However, it comes at a price of performance, because those components will be reinstantiated, onInit will be called, and it will be re-rendered, etc. So please use it wisely. So those were the lifecycle hooks. Let's say we still would like to run our code even earlier within the component. So where should we put our code so that it's going to be executed before onInit and on changes? It's no longer Angular, it's TypeScript or JavaScript world. Yeah, very good. So in the logger, I'll activate the constructor, reload the application, and as you can see, we have some constructor logging outputs from the app module. Well, I had some criminal vibes, and I looked into the module, and of course this is just a class, and all the classes have constructors. So theoretically, you could put a constructor there, theoretically, you could execute some code there, but you probably shouldn't. So here we see all the constructor outputs that we expected, the app component, some the content component, some lifecycle hooks, then the child, the content item component, etc. If I navigate to the contact component, we see the logging service, because if we switch to the component implementation, I injected the logging service in my constructor. So this is what Angular injector does under the hood. It instantiates my dependency first, and only then my contact component. This is just to bear in mind that the services are usually instantiated when they are requested, when they're needed, and this is actually a good thing. Later on, we will have a look what to do if we would like our services to be instantiated at the very beginning. But before, let's have a look where we're standing now. So we are able to execute the code at the beginning of the component. But what if we would like to execute our code even before we go to this component, like on the way to the component? On the way meaning navigation, navigation meaning routing. So here we have several opportunities. For example, several guards and a resolver. So here I deactivate the lifecycle hooks. And let's have a look at our resolver and some guards. Let's have a look at our routing module. In here we have the content, and I prepared a resolver because I'd like to load the data before the user gets to the component. And this is the user data resolver. In my case, it just returns some observable, but you can actually make some HTTP requests here to get the actual content. And it makes sense to check if the user is logged in before navigating to the content. So I have a guard, which is a logging guard. In my nested routes, in my children, I also decided that I'd like to check if my users are over 18. So apparently I'm serving some adult content. Now let's have a look what happens here. We go to the content, we have the guard, we have the resolver. So far, so logical. And then we go to the content, and then we see the over 18 guard. So this is the sequence that we would expect. However, if I preserve the log, and yeah, it's already there, perfect, and reload the application, you might see that the sequence changed because those guard requests have been kind of hoisted or aggregated and moved upwards if I call the whole nested route so that all the guards of the nested routes are executed first, and only then will be the resolver called, although this is the resolver of the parent. So this is a peculiarity of this particular combination of guards and resolvers that I'd like you to bear in mind when implementing. But in general, the rule of thumb is that first come the guards and then the resolvers. One more guard that I'd like to show is the can load one. So as you can see, can load is executed first, and the can activate is executed second. It doesn't matter which sequence I put it in here. This is kind of a logical order. First, I check if I'd like to load my JavaScript, and then I check if the user can navigate to this route. So yes, now we are able to execute the code before the component is being instantiated. But what if we'd like to execute the code at the very beginning? And what is the beginning? It's also like a kind of a philosophical question. For this, Angular gives us 3 injection tokens to define more precisely what is the beginning. The first one is the app bootstrapping token here. Sure. Let's have a look. Here it goes. So we see the app module constructor, we see the app component, which is the bootstrap component, and after that, the app bootstrap listener injection token is being called. So what does it look like? If we have a look at the app module, we have here a provider. We provide a token. To provide it, we need to return a method which takes a component and returns a void. So we use a factory, we take in the component, which is the bootstrap component, and we return something. Like here, we return void. In this case, we just log it. So this is the app component which is being used. So now we have the information about the bootstrap component. Well, I don't have a real use case for this particular injection token. For the next one, I do. And the next one is being hidden behind the constant service initializer. Let's say marketing wants us to track our users. So we'd like to initiate our constant service as soon as possible. So we have to use the app initializer token when the app is being initialized. And here we provide the token and use a factory, and in the factory can inject some services and use them. So for example, we can make some calls or set up some configuration, whatever. And this is being called after the before the bootstrap component when the app is being initialized. So to sum up, there was a click of the user and the code execution. We had the onInit lifecycle hook. We had the constructor. We had some resolvers, can activate, can load. We have the bootstrap component. We have the app which is initialized. and I still have some place because we have the last injection token, which is a platform initializer. Because actually, before the application needs a platform to run in, and this might be browser, but we also have server-side rendered applications, Angular Universal, etc. So after, even before the application is initialized, we have to initialize this platform, and this is exactly the injection token that we have. And this one resides in the main TS. You might recognize this part of code because this is the default main TS configuration. However, the platform browser dynamic accepts an optional parameter, and that's what we are using here. We are providing platform initializer. We also use a factory for this. We inject the tracking service. It looks like this. And I need to log it. So that was here and here. So, and let's have a look at our application now. So we see that the platform initializer starts the first, then we have the app module which is being constructed, then we have the app which is being initialized, then we have the app component which is being constructed, and then we have the app bootstrap listener. So that was the beginning of the Angular application. The problem with platform initializer is that there is no services, there's no components, there's nothing. So actually you cannot do a lot with this hook, but it is there, so you know that you have this option. You might do some static stuff, loading some static data, whatever. Yeah, so here is the last resort of Angular run execution possibilities. You still can go even further into the past and execute the code even earlier, meaning that you just put it in the script tag and your index HTML, and then you're out of Angular at all. So coming back to the present, and let's move to the future. I have 2 steps for the future. In this case, our user clicked on the button, and afterwards would like to do something. Let's say we have our contact form, and there are some unsafe changes. The well-known option what to do here would be the lifecycle hook can deactivate to warn the user if the user wants to do something about it, or maybe to save it. So in here, I just activate it. True. And as you can see, if I navigate away from contact, the can deactivate guard is being called. So it's been configured here in my routing module, and this is here. However, there is also a caveat to this, because if the user types the URL by himself or herself, if the user closes the tab or just navigates away from the Angular application, there is nothing we can do. There is really little time to say goodbye. For this, we have to rely on the browser capabilities, and in this case, we are leaving the Angular world, but still can execute some last code in here by using the onBefore unload. The example would be in the app component. I use the host listener. I listen to the before unload event being dispatched on the window, and I call the method, and I return some value. This is browser specific. So when I reload the page, you see this ugly browserly looking pop-up. We cannot style it, unfortunately, but at least we have it. So with can deactivate, we're still in the Angular world. We can have beautiful pop-ups. In here, we get what we have, but it's better than nothing. One thing to mind here is that this pop-up will be only shown if the user interacts with the website. So if I reload the website right now, nothing will happen. This is kind of logical because there could not be any unsafe changes if the user hasn't done anything. So that's something that you should bear in mind. And here again, it comes at a price. I don't know how many of you know the back and forward cache. This is the capability of the browsers to increase the performance by caching some pages and not have to re-render them again if the user clicks to the browser back or browser forward. So based on several criteria, browsers decide which pages are eligible for the cache and which not. And before unload is the gray area. So some browsers like Chrome accept it and say they will still cache it. However, Safari won't. So it comes at a price if you decide to listen to this event. If the user clicks back and forward, the page will be rendered. Having said that, let's come to the conclusions. Which are here. So we talked about caching of the routing components and route reuse strategy. We talked about the guards and this peculiar sequence of guards and resolvers in the nested routes. We talked about the app initializers and further injection tokens that you can use at the beginning of the application. We've just talked about the before unload and the consequences of using it for the performance. But if there's just one takeaway that I would like you to take with you is the last one. Be careful with moving your code and executing it earlier and earlier in the application process, because the earlier the code is being executed, the longer the user waits for the application to start, like for the module to be constructed, for the components to be bootstrapped, for all this routing, initialization, etc. So mind your core web vitals and choose wisely when to execute your code. And with that, welcome back to the present, and thank you for your attention.